Did your family have favorites? If so, were you the favorite or someone else?
You know how some families have this unspoken tradition of making every milestone feel like a red carpet event for one child, while the other one might as well be a background extra in their own life. That has been the dynamic in my family for as long as I can remember, and while I used to think maybe I was exaggerating it in my head, over the years the pattern became so painfully obvious that even friends who barely knew us would notice. My younger sister Melissa was always the center of attention, the golden one, the one whose achievements were celebrated as if she'd just discovered a cure for some incurable disease, while I was treated like I was fine on my own. As though I didn't need support, encouragement, or even acknowledgement. And birthdays? Those were the clearest example of the gap between us, because every single year, without fail, my parents would throw themselves into planning some extravagant, envy-inducing getaway for Melissa's big day, posting hundreds of pictures online of her drinking cocktails on a beach, parasailing over turquoise water, or being serenaded at some luxury restaurant, while my birthday often passed without even a phone call. Last week was my birthday, and I wish I could tell you that after years of this, I'd finally been surprised that they had done something to break the cycle, that they'd maybe shown up or sent a card, or even texted more than just happy birthday, with no punctuation, but the truth is they did even less than usual. My mom didn't call. My dad didn't call. Melissa didn't call. No one called. I got a Facebook notification that my mom had liked an old picture of mine from 2 years ago, and that was about as much acknowledgement as I got. The thing that really stung wasn't the absence of gifts or attention. It was the knowledge that this wasn't a mistake, that they hadn't simply forgotten. They just didn't care enough to make it a priority. I've seen them rearrange entire schedules for Melissa's birthday dinners, cancel work trips to be with her, pool money together for lavish presents. For me, they always seemed to assume I'd be fine, that I wouldn't take it personally, that maybe I'd even prefer the quiet. I used to bring it up, gently at first, like, hey, you know my birthday's coming up, hoping they'd realize how much it mattered to me, but the few times I dared to point out the difference in how we were treated, my mom would roll her eyes and say, "Oh, come on. You're not the kind of person who needs all that fuss," as if that somehow made it okay. The message was clear. Melissa deserved the fuss, I didn't. Over the years, I learned to swallow the bitterness, because every time I brought it up, it was turned back on me, framed as me being jealous or overly sensitive, and I got tired of defending myself over something so basic. So last week, when my birthday rolled around and the silence from them was deafening, I didn't text them to remind them, I didn't drop hints, I didn't post anything that might guilt them into calling. I just let the day pass like it was nothing. I went about my work, ordered takeout, and told no one it was my birthday except one close friend who already knew the history. And here's the thing, I wasn't sad in the way I used to be. I wasn't waiting for them to come through, because deep down I knew they wouldn't. Instead, I felt this strange, almost calm satisfaction in knowing that this year, they had no idea what I was planning. Melissa's birthday is in 2 weeks, and of course, the plans for her annual celebration are already in motion. I've seen the group texts flying between my parents and her, with links to resorts, screenshots of menus, talk about spa packages, and snorkeling excursions. They do all of this out in the open, never caring that I can see it, almost as if my feelings are irrelevant. In the past, I would dread watching it play out again, bracing myself for the inevitable comparisons, but this year feels different. This year, I am not going to sit on the sidelines, swallowing my resentment while they parade their favoritism in my face. I'm not going to argue, and I'm not going to complain. Because for the first time in my life, I have something they want to see but can't control. I've been working for years, quietly building my career, saving my money, making choices they'd never notice because they weren't looking closely enough to see them. And now I have the means to make a statement that doesn't involve raising my voice or asking them for anything. It's not going to be a speech or a confrontation. It's going to be something so simple, so casual, that it will hit them harder than any fight ever could. So when they jet off to whatever 5-star resort Melissa has picked out for her birthday, I'll be here, waiting for just the right moment to drop my little surprise. I'm not going to announce it to them directly, and I'm certainly not going to warn them. All I have to do is let them find out the way they find out about everything these days, by scrolling through their phones. And when they do, I want them to realize, in that exact instant, that they have no idea who I really am or what I'm capable of. This year, I didn't blow out candles or make a wish. I didn't need to. I already know exactly what's coming. And the best part? They have no idea it's going to be about me. If you want the honest version, the part one do not usually say out loud because it sounds petty even though it is true. I started keeping score a long time ago, not with a spreadsheet or a wall calendar, but in the quiet way you file things in your head so you do not forget what they mean. Like the year I graduated and my parents mailed Melissa a care package for surviving midterms while telling me they were proud in a voicemail that cut off at the end. Or the year I landed my first management role and my dad asked if I could take photos of Melissa's anniversary dinner because the lighting at the restaurant made their phones look grainy, and I said yes because it was easier to do it than to explain why the ask felt like a small bruise. And then there were the birthdays that kept confirming the pattern until it became our family's routine, with Melissa getting trips and spa days and public toasts while I learned to keep the day as ordinary as any Tuesday, so ordinary that even I stopped expecting anything different. I do not tell you this for pity. I tell you because it explains why I became so disciplined about my life, why I built a career my parents never fully understood, why I said no to dinners I could not afford and yes to work that paid less today but promised more tomorrow, why I watched other people have fun while I learned to negotiate, to save, to invest, to show up for myself in quiet ways no one applauded. There was a season when I could have chosen to drift and make it someone else's problem, to blame my parents and turn bitter in a way that poisons everything, but I made a different choice, one that did not look dramatic from the outside. Because it was not about revenge yet, it was about patience, and it started the day I realized that my family would never see me clearly until something forced them to update the picture in their heads, and that something would not be me talking, because talking had never worked. It would have to be proof they could not mislabel or explain away, and if that proof took years to build, then fine, I would give it years. I freelanced at night after my day job because one contract led to another, and then to a retainer that paid me more in a quarter than my salary did in a year, and I kept my taxes clean and my receipts sorted. And when a client I had stuck with through their messy early days sold their company and sent me a bonus for staying loyal, I did not post the champagne or the check or the new office view. I moved the money where it needed to go and opened a separate account with no card attached because I did not want to be tempted and I did not want to be noisy. It became almost a private joke with myself that the more my parents bragged about Melissa's upgrades, the more I upgraded silently, not out of spite, but out of a stubborn belief that I did not need their applause to be real. When people ask how it felt to never be invited to the big show, I tell them it taught me to build my own stage, and maybe that sounds like something you would read on a poster, but for me it meant unglamorous habits that add up. Like cooking at home when I wanted to eat out, driving my old car a few extra years because it still worked, refusing to run up a credit balance to look successful in photos, keeping my LinkedIn updated even when it felt cringe because every opportunity one have ever gotten started with someone remembering my name at the right moment. It also meant letting go of the hope that my parents would suddenly develop curiosity about my life, because hoping for that hurt more than accepting they would not, and once I accepted it, I stopped chasing the crumbs of their interest and started deciding what I actually wanted, which turned out not to be their approval at all, but something cleaner, a sense that I had options, and that I could choose how to respond instead of reacting. If you think I am saying this like I was always zen about it, I was not, and there were days I cried in the shower because it is humiliating to feel like a footnote in your own family. And there were nights when I drafted long messages to my mom and then deleted them because I knew exactly how the conversation would go, with her telling me I was overthinking and me explaining again that birthdays are not about money, they are about being seen. And then she would say that I am strong and independent, as if that cancels the need for a slice of cake with your name on it and a phone call that lasts longer than a minute. Those moments are part of the record too, because the long game is not just strategy and discipline, it is endurance. It is pushing through the lonely parts without becoming the kind of person who punishes everyone for not understanding, and I am proud, truly proud, that I did not become that person. Around the time Melissa announced her plan for a week-long island trip this year, with a group chat full of links and exclamation points, and not a single mention of my birthday that had already come and gone, I made a small decision that looked like nothing but felt like a turning point. I muted the family thread, not to be dramatic, but to stop letting those messages live at the top of my day, and then I did something pettier and also, I think, necessary for my sanity, which was to quietly remove them from seeing my stories, not because I was planning anything that minute, but because I wanted the next thing they saw from me to land all at once instead of in fragments they could reframe. Call it a boundary or call it a setup. For me it was both. I stopped liking Melissa's travel countdown posts, not as a tantrum, but because I was done feeding the performance, and when she texted to ask if I was okay because my silence made her nervous, I told her I was busy with work and that I hoped she had the best time, which was true enough and also not the whole truth, because what I was busy with had less to do with work than with timing. There are people who think revenge has to be loud and messy to count, that you have to burn bridges and make speeches, and let everyone know exactly how you feel before you get your payoff. But I have learned that the most effective kind of justice is the kind that leaves no ashes on your hands, and the first move in that kind of game is to stop asking for what will never be given and put your energy into what you can control. So I started treating my silence as a tool, not a symptom, and I set up the smallest of traps, one that did not hurt anyone and did not break any rules, but would make a point so clean it could not be argued with. I changed one more setting that afternoon, a detail most people would never think about, and made sure my future post would reach exactly the audience I wanted before it reached my family, because if they were going to discover me, they were going to discover me through the same feed they had used to ignore me for years, only this time the comments would not be theirs first, and the story would not be theirs to spin. So when Melissa sent the itinerary and my mom followed with a message asking if I could feed her cat while they were away since I would be around anyway, I said yes, because it amused me to imagine how that would read a few days later. And then I circled a date on my calendar that only I understood, a date that lined up with a delivery I had scheduled months earlier and paid for in full, and I felt a calm I had not felt in years, the kind of calm that says the work is done and all that is left is execution. If you are wondering whether this is me being calculated, it is, and if that bothers you, I get it, because it is not pretty to admit that you are planning an impact, but after a lifetime of letting people tell me who I am ready to let evidence do the talking, and the evidence is almost here. Tomorrow morning I will sign the last paper and pick up the keys, and when I do, I will make one post, just one, and then I will put my phone face down and drive, because I already know what happens next, and I want them to feel it before I say a word. The morning I drove to the dealership, I felt that quiet steadiness you only get when your mind has already rehearsed every step and there is nothing left to debate. Because the decision was made months ago when the retainer cleared and the bonus landed, and I promised myself I would do one significant thing that was just for me, paid in full, no apologies, no explanations, and now it was simply execution, which, as it turns out, is much less dramatic than people think, since it looks like paperwork, signatures, a walkthrough of features I already knew by heart from late-night research, and a title with my name alone on it, and while the sales guy tried to make it feel celebratory with a bow and a photo and a pitch about posting to their page, I kept it low, thanked him, declined the confetti energy, and asked for home delivery at a specific hour the next day, because timing mattered more than theatrics, and I needed the drop-off to happen when the people who had trained me to be invisible were busy performing their version of love in a different time zone. I know how that sounds, like I am playing spy, but really it was simple math. Melissa's flight took off mid-morning and landed late afternoon, which meant there was a window when she would be half present on Wi-Fi at the airport and then unreachable in the air while my parents fussed over transfers and luggage and hotel check-in and welcome drinks. So if my post went live late afternoon, it would hit the feed right as their attention flickered between bragging rights and boredom, the perfect Moment for curiosity to do the work. On the drive home in my old car that had served me faithfully for years, I thought about the narrative they carried around about me, the one where I am fine, always fine, borderline dull in my reliability. And how much that story had protected them from seeing the parts they did not want to see, like the fact that I outworked almost everyone I knew, not out of ambition alone, but out of a need to never again feel at the mercy of anyone's attention, and how I had learned to be comfortable with being misunderstood, because being understood by the wrong people is a trap, and by the time I parked, I knew the post itself had to match that principle: minimal, unassuming, hard to misinterpret, and impossible to argue with. No captions that begged for envy, no inspirational nonsense, no long essay about being overlooked, just a photograph that told a clean truth and a line that would sit like a stone in the stomachs of people who believed they had me figured out. There was one more layer to the plan that did not look like revenge on paper, but absolutely was, and it had to do with control over the narrative and the comments. Because I was not going to hand them the microphone and invite them to reframe my life as a reckless splurge or a cry for attention. So I edited my audience lists with care and gave early visibility to the people who had actually shown up for me when the feed was quiet, friends who knew my discipline and would respond with unforced joy, mentors who had seen my invoices and would not ask how I could afford it, colleagues who had become confidants through late-night deadlines, and who understood exactly how many years sat behind this one picture. And then I hid the story from my family for just long enough to let the first wave of responses set the tone, because if there is one thing I learned from being sidelined year after year, it is that sometimes you win by setting the frame and letting others walk into it. While I was at it, I took care of the boring parts that make the big moments feel stable: the insurance policy set up correctly with the proper coverage, the second key stored where only I can reach it, the plate paperwork filed, the payment receipts organized, because I did not want to give anyone the satisfaction of scolding me about being irresponsible. And then I did something that felt almost ceremonial in its smallness. I cleaned out the glove box of the old car and found a wrinkled printout of a reservation from a birthday dinner I took myself to 4 years ago, the year my parents sent Melissa to a fancy spa outing and forgot to call me until the next morning, and I thought about how far I had come without their applause. And I put the paper in the shredder, not because I wanted to pretend it never happened, but because I wanted space for a new record of how my life goes when I stop waiting for people to notice it. Around noon, Melissa messaged me a picture of her boarding pass with a row of exclamation marks and a note about how she hoped I could swing by their house to feed the cat because the neighbor had canceled. And while the old version of me would have replied with a cheerful yes and a promise to send updates, the current version kept it simple and kind and non-negotiable. I said I could do it once. I would keep the key for a few days. And I would leave everything exactly as I found it, which is the sort of boundary that looks like nothing until you understand that for years I said yes to everything to avoid being labeled difficult, and maybe that does not sound like revenge to you, but to me it was the first clean cut from an old script. Then I turned off their message notifications again, because even small moves deserve quiet. The delivery arrived the next day right on time, and there was a moment, just a breath, when I considered keeping it private, driving around with a grin no one could take from me. But then I remembered what this was about. Not a brag, not a plea, but a mirror. And I parked, framed the shot the way I had practiced, one simple angle, no location tag, nothing flashy, and typed a caption that was as plain as a fact. Finally picked her up, worth every penny, which was the closest I would come to, telling them that not only did I do this alone, I did it without debt, without help, without asking for permission or advice, and then I hovered over the publish button, counted to 5, and pressed. I put the phone face down and let the first minutes pass with no audience in my head, just the hum of my own satisfaction, and when I finally turned the screen over, the effect was immediate in the most predictable and therefore satisfying way. Because the people who mattered had already shown up in the comments with the kind of steady happiness I could feel through the screen, and in the background, the preview of the family thread filled with the kind of half-sentences and questions that read like someone trying to catch their breath, and while I did not open it yet, I recognized the rhythm of shock when certainty breaks, and I will not lie, It felt like oxygen after a very long swim. For the small, precise act of revenge this episode promised, I did one more thing before I drove anywhere, and it was not flashy and it did not hurt a soul, but it tasted like justice to me. I updated my profile bio to include my business website, the one my parents had never asked me about, and I toggled visibility so that anyone who clicked through would see my work before they saw my car, which meant that the next time anyone in my family tried to reduce me to a purchase or a post, the receipts lived one tap away, lined up neatly with dates and clients and testimonials, and I could finally stop explaining myself, because the evidence spoke louder than I ever could, and now the only thing left was to watch who heard it. When I say the post went live and the room changed, I do not mean anything mystical or dramatic. I mean the phone lit up in a way that tells you the story people held in their heads about you just ran into a wall. Because within a handful of breaths, the first comments rolled in from the people who have actually watched me grind for years, the ones who have heard me take calls on holidays and push through weekends, and their happiness sounded like something solid. And I let that sit for a while. Before I even thought about the family thread, because the point of all this was not to fight with anyone, it was to anchor my own narrative and let them come to it on my terms. And when I finally opened the preview pane, the subject lines told me everything anyway. With my mother's name stacked 3 deep and my father's question marks lined up like he had lost his place in a book, and Melissa already in full speed with the kind of tone she reserves for moments when she feels outflanked. Clipped, performative concern about whether I had done something impulsive, followed by a dig about how social media is not the place for financial announcements, which made me laugh out loud because she has documented every resort breakfast she has ever eaten, every upgrade, every facial, every champagne toast, as if that is somehow different from one photograph of something I actually built. I did not answer, not yet, because the instinct to explain is a reflex I have worked hard to dismantle, so instead I pinned a comment that deserved to be seen first. A short note from an old client who wrote that I had been the backbone of their expansion during a messy year and that seeing me celebrate made their day, and I let that be the context while the notifications kept stacking. And then I did something that sounds small, but felt like a line in the sand, which was to turn off typing bubbles in our family chat, so I could not watch their sentences appear and disappear, because there is a kind of power in refusing to sit there and read the wind. The first wave of direct messages came from cousins and family friends, people who have always been kind in that distant way, and their reactions were mostly simple congratulations with a little curiosity around the edges, and I answered those, thanking them, acknowledging their kindness, because what I wanted, more than a spectacle, was to let the truth of my life breathe without being suffocated by the same old script. By early evening, my mother finally picked a lane, which was half worry and half accusation, opening with a line about how she wished I had told them I was thinking about a big purchase so they could give advice, and then immediately pivoting to a lecture about debt and interest and how fast those monthly payments can sneak up on you, and I sat with that for a minute, not because I did not know what to say, but because I wanted to be sure I said it from the place I have been building, so I wrote back one sentence that was calm and final and left no oxygen for the usual spin. I said that I do not carry debt on vehicles, that the title is in my name only, that my paperwork is complete and my plans are in order, and that I am not available for a financial intervention. She did not like that, of course she did not, because it shut the door she wanted to pry open, and she came back with the line she always uses when she feels her grip slip, which is that she is only trying to help and that I have been very private lately, and I told her she is welcome to feel any way she wants, and that privacy is not a crime. Melissa, for her part, moved to a different complaint that is her favorite when she senses attention shifting, accusing me of trying to upstage her trip with a flashy purchase, and I could feel the indignation leaping off the screen. And I will admit that a petty part of me enjoyed the symmetry, because after years of watching her center herself casually on my days, it did not feel unfair to let my own news stand on hers, and even then I did not say so, because I did not need the fight. So I simply wrote that I am happy for her, that she should enjoy her time, that my life choices are not a press release about anyone else, and that I will be feeding the cat exactly as promised, and then locking the door behind me. She doubled down with a string of messages about how money changes people and how I should not become that person, and I did not take the bait, because money did not change me, clarity did. And sometimes the person you become when you stop chasing scraps looks unrecognizable to people who are used to your hunger. There was one more move I saved for this moment, and it was not cruel or dramatic, just exact, which was to post a second photograph to my stories for a limited audience that included my family this time. A simple shot of the registration page with my name visible and the word paid stamped across the invoice. No gloating, no long caption, just the plain proof that I had not mortgaged my stability for a dopamine hit. And I set the duration short so it would vanish quickly, because the point was not to humiliate anyone but to remove the room for rumor. Within minutes my father was calling, and I let it go to voicemail. Then he texted to say that people at his club were asking whether I had gotten a promotion because they saw the post, and that he had not known I was doing so well. And the irony of him learning about my career through third parties while standing in a place he has bragged about Melissa 1,000 times was not lost on me. But I did not rub it in. I wrote back that I am fine, that work has been stable for a while, and that the reason he did not know is because he did not ask. To make sure the day ended on my terms, I drove the car that night. Just before I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, my mother sent one more message, the one that tells you the balance of power has shifted even if the words try to hide it, asking to meet when they return because she feels out of the loop and wants to understand my choices. And I looked at that word and thought about all the years my choices were treated like background noise, and I typed a reply that was short for me and very clear, telling her we can talk on Sunday at my place, that I will be there at 2, that I would prefer it be just the 3 of us without Melissa, and that I will bring the folder, and I hit send knowing exactly what that sentence would do to their sleep. Because the folder is what people ask to see when they finally realize they are not holding the story anymore. And if you think that sounds cold, maybe it is, but the truth is I have been more than warm enough for long enough. And now I am curious to see who wants the truth more than the comfort. Which is why I locked the door, put the phone face down, and let the silence do its job before the next part, the part 1 have been rehearsing for years. They came on Sunday exactly on time, which is how you know they were nervous, because my parents are never early unless something matters to them, and I had already put the folder on the table because I wanted to remove the one story they love to hide behind. The one where I am reckless or naive or easily led, and I let them sit, and I let the silence last long enough for my mother to start with polite questions she did not actually want answered, and then I opened the folder and laid out the only things that belong in a conversation like this, which were tax returns, contract summaries with the numbers masked, but the totals clear, bank letters confirming no debt on the car, insurance in place, maintenance already scheduled, and a copy of the title with my name alone. And I watched the change happen in my father's face, not triumph for me, but the sudden recognition that he has been holding an outdated file on his own daughter, and I told them I was not going to spend the afternoon educating them on my career because I have been doing this for years and the door has always been open. But what I would do is establish the plan going forward so there is no confusion and no room for the old dance where concern is used as a lever to pry open my life and then minimize whatever they find there. I said I appreciate their interest, late as it may be, and I am not angry, because anger would give them too much power, but I am done with the roles we all kept pretending worked. So here is how it will be now. I will not be the errand person when Melissa travels. I will not be the backup parent when anyone forgets to plan. I will not carry the emotional load of being the strong one while being dismissed. And on birthdays there will either be equal effort or there will be quiet, and if that sounds harsh, it is only because everything softer has been ignored. My mother tried the classic move, the one where she cries about feeling shut out and asks whether I am punishing the family, and I told her I am not punishing anyone, I am simply ending a system that did not work for me. And if she wants access to my life, then she needs to show up when there is nothing shiny to post about, and if she wants to understand my choices, she needs to stop labeling them as overreactions the moment they inconvenience her plans. And I said it without heat because this was not a fight, it was a rerouting, and I meant every word. My father asked if there was a man involved, which would be funny if it were not so predictable, and I said no, there is not, and if there were, it would not change the point, which is that I am not asking for permission, I am setting terms. And then I slid across the table a single printed page, not a legal contract, just a boundary sheet written in plain language, listing what I will and will not do, what I expect on my birthday, what I will not attend if it turns into a comparison contest, and what happens if anyone tries to use guilt or silence as a tactic, and I told them I would be happy to have a real relationship if we all sign it with our behavior, not our pens. They did not like the phrasing, and they did not like the clarity, and my mother said something small about how this all feels transactional, and I said no, it feels adult, and that is what makes it uncomfortable. I did something else in that moment that I am still proud of because it took me years to learn, which was to avoid defending myself past one clean explanation. So when my mother circled back to the car and said a luxury vehicle is a statement and people will talk, I said I am aware of what it looks like, and I am fine with it, and then I changed the subject. Because I do not owe her the play-by-play of my savings rate or my investment timeline, and I will not turn my life into a courtroom where love is conditional on proving that every move was optimal. I also told them one last practical thing so there would be no surprises later, which was that I have updated my emergency contacts to include a friend who actually picks up the phone and gives clear information, that I am not available to be anyone's default caretaker by assumption, and that if they want me in a crisis, then they need to treat me like a person, not a utility, in the regular days too, and I said it kindly, because I am not trying to win a debate, I am trying to win back my time. They left without committing to the boundary sheet, which is exactly what I expected, because people do not sign new rules in the first meeting when the old rules protected them, and I did not chase them down the steps, I did not beg. I did not soften anything with jokes, I simply walked back inside and put the folder away, and then I did the last move I had planned, the one that was never about gloating and always about closure, which was to schedule a post for that evening that would go live. To everyone including them, a simple picture of a plain cake on my kitchen counter with a key sitting next to it, and a caption that said, "Bought myself the birthday I always wanted, no parties needed," which was not a stab at them so much as a statement to myself that I will no longer measure my worth by anyone else's calendar. The messages started almost immediately, a second wave even louder than the first, with cousins cheering and a few old family friends sending long paragraphs about how they always knew I was capable and were glad to see me claim my own space. And then, right on cue, Melissa's texts started pouring in from whatever lounge she was sitting in, calling me petty for posting on her week and accusing me of trying to embarrass her. And I did not engage, because it is not my job to teach my sister the difference between attention and respect. For the record, the revenge part of this story is not the car, and it is not the post, and it is not the meeting. It is the calm that came after, the silence I chose on purpose, the decision to treat my time like a valuable thing and to let other people feel the weight of their choices without me cushioning the impact. And if that sounds cold, then maybe I have finally learned to tolerate being misunderstood by the right people. A few days later, my mother texted to say that they would like to celebrate my birthday when they return and asked what day works, and for the first time in my life I did not rush to accept the crumbs. I sent a short list of conditions that were clear and reasonable. Equal attention, no toasts about Melissa, no probing about money, and I said if that feels like too much, we can postpone for another time, and I left it there, and I meant it. They have not answered yet, and I am not waiting by the phone, because the point was never to force an apology. The point was to end a pattern that kept me small, and I ended it. Some people will hear this and say I went too far, and some will say I did not go far enough, and that is fine, because I did not do it for them. I did it for the version of me who sat alone on her birthday more than once and still showed up to feed a cat while being told she was overreacting, and if you want to know whether it felt good, it did. Not like fireworks. More like finally getting a full breath after years of shallow ones. And no, I did not answer every question my family wanted answered, because the most satisfying part of all of this is knowing that for once, they have to sit with not knowing, and I get to drive away without looking in the mirror, not because I am running, but because I am finally on a road I chose.